honored him to speak to us tonight, and it's with great pleasure that he is able to come to share his story. And he has a very unusual story, as you might have read in the paper today, of a big, large, former Montana Farmer of the Year, rancher, who has become a vegetarian and sustainable agriculture advocate. And he is going to share his story here as brief shortly. I just want to take a minute to tell you about our groups that are going on. 3 groups that have sponsored Howard: AIG, SUM, Student Government, Campus Advent, and Whole Food Group, and Whole Food Group, Good Health Group, and Earth Save Missoula. And the Whole Food Group is this something that is initiating here, and it's vegetarian emphasis. And if anyone would like to be involved in such a group, we'll be having our announcements. We hope to have a meeting Monday. We'll put the time and when we are meeting, and we're going to be doing potlucks and education, bringing in speakers such as Howard, and the sign up and table and more information is outside, along with Earth Save and Campus Advent. And I'll cut it short now. You don't want to listen to me so much, so here's a man that will give you a lot of things to think about tonight. Thank you.
You should never applaud for somebody until you hear what they have to say. You can't get it back. My name is Howard Lyman. I'm a 4th-generation farmer, rancher, feedlot operator. I travel around the world about 11 out of 12 months of the year, and I talk to people about the proper amount of animal products to have in their diet as being 0. You look at that and you say, wait a minute. 4th-generation farmer, rancher, feedlot operator talking about not eating animal products? Must be smoking the #1 crop out of California. #1 cash crop in Montana also. But what I want to talk to you tonight about is I want to talk to you about the future. See, we have some people out here that are in the business. I want to talk to you about the future. We are going towards a cliff at 200 miles an hour. I will tell you right now that if we do not change what we're doing today in the United States of America, there will be no future for our children and grandchildren. I want to talk to you about thinking. I don't want you to walk out of here tonight and say, oh, hallelujah, I have heard the gospel according to Lyman. I want you to walk out of here tonight and say, that's the craziest ex-farmer I ever saw in my life. I wonder if he knew a damn thing of what he was talking about. I want you to go to the bookstore, the library. I want you to invest yourself in the issue. Because if you just listen to what I have to say tonight, I guarantee you in 60 days you're going to be so busy you won't remember what I had to say. But if you go to the bookstore or the library, you get a book and invest yourself in the issue, it'll be with you for a lifetime. Isn't that an amazing thing? That we have a presidential election coming up. We're going to end up with Al Gore and George Bush Jr. They're going to be running against each other. Of all of the problems that we have, problems like that within your lifetime, the Arctic ice field has the potential, at the rate we're going today, to disappear. That we have taken an ice field that went from 14 feet thick to the mere 7, that has retreated hundreds of miles, that we have found 3 new islands that we did not know existed before, that we just had the hottest winter in human recorded history in the United States of America, that we have a hunk of ice that is broken off of the South Pole that is 1.5 times larger than the state of Rhode Island, and within 18 years at this rate, the Arctic ice field will cease to exist. The water off of the coast of California today is 4 degrees warmer than it was 40 years ago. That 300 years ago, when the boat people came to North America, we had the deepest, richest topsoil of any nation on the face of the earth. And in less than 300 years, we have lost 75% of all the topsoil that was here when the boat people landed. It takes 500 years to produce 1 inch of topsoil. We haven't been here long enough to produce an inch, and we lost 3/4 of what we have. In the Gulf of Mexico today, there's an area that is larger than the state of New Jersey that is absolutely totally dead because of herbicides, pesticides, hormones, and medication that's washed off of the central part of the United States. Every great civilization that has ever failed on the planet Earth has always failed for one reason. They were unable to feed their people. Today, the United States of America, we take 70% of all of our grain and we're stuffing it down the throats of animals. It takes 16 pounds of grain to put 1 pound of meat on your plate. It takes 70 calories of energy to produce 1 calorie of meat. 16 pounds of grain in a world that is doubling the population every 40 and 50 years will feed 32 people. 1 pound of meat will feed Rush Limbaugh. Which is the best use of our resources? I have people that come to me and say, wait a minute, it's a good idea to continue to feed meat to Rush. If we continue to do it, it's going to get him. I'm not sure it's the Christian approach, but I'll tell you it's a damn good idea. But you know, what we need to do is we need to stop and think that the day that I was born, we have twice as many people today as the day I was born. And if I live to the age I aspire to, that number will double again. That we today have 6 billion people on the planet. And the day that I could die, that it could be 12 billion. If we took every person on the face of the earth today and we fed them exactly the same diet that they eat in Missoula, Montana, 1 out of every 2 people in the world today would go to bed hungry. If we took the same diet they eat in Central America, where they only eat half of the animal products that we eat in the United States of America, if we fed everybody on the planet, all 6 billion people, the diet of Central America, we would end up with 1 out of every 3 that would go hungry. But if we took the diet that is being eaten today in Missoula, Montana, and each and every one of us reduced our consumption of animal products only 10%, we could feed every hungry person on the face of the earth. Stop and think about it. We today are absolutely eating the earth with our fork. As you sit here tonight, if nothing changes, if everything goes on as we are doing today, then rainforests worldwide will cease to exist in your lifetime. Ancient forests will cease to exist in your lifetime. The Arctic ice field will cease to exist in your lifetime. The largest underground aquifer, the Ogallala, that took millions of years to fill, something that you can take the Great Lakes in and put in it several times over, that we are pumping out water to grow grain to stuff down the throats of animals. In your lifetime, at the rate we're doing it, the largest underground aquifer in the world will be dry. These are things that not could happen. These are things that are happening today. If we were in Australia today, in Australia where 100% of all of the people living in Australia before they die will have cancer. 100%. If you open up the newspaper in Australia, it will tell you whether the kids in school can go out and play on the playground depending on the hole in the ozone layer. In Australia, they have a program that says, wear shirts, put on sunscreen, put on a hat, wear dark glasses. Who in the world is putting dark glasses on all of the animals because of the hole in the ozone layer? This isn't something about the future. This is right now. And we're going to have a presidential election. Do you think we're going to talk about those issues? Are we going to say to the American people that we're going towards a cliff at 200 miles an hour? You know what the bureaucrats and the politicians are talking about now? Oh, we got to organize all of the ambulances at the bottom of the cliff. The people that survive going over, we're going to give them the best care possible. Isn't it about time when we change the road? Look around tonight. Do you know what's missing here tonight? Joe Sixpack is not here tonight. Joe Sixpack is sitting home, he's got his feet up, he's probably listening to Rush on the radio. He hasn't got time to come to think about the future of our children and grandchildren. I worked 5 years in Washington, D.C., and after 5 years of working there, I learned a thing that was called the Golden Rule. Them that got the gold make the rules. We got the best damn government that money can buy. And after 5 years of working there, I said to my friends, I said, you know, this game is rigged. The deck is marked. We will never win in Washington, D.C. And my friends said to me, what are you going to do? Go talk to the people? And I said, yeah. And they said, oh, you're never going to get half of the people to do anything. I told them, we don't need half. 80% of all the people alive on the planet today are brain dead. They're part of the herd. They're following nose to tail, and when you follow nose to tail, there is only one thing you ever see in front of you. It's the 20% of the people that are thinking. And when the majority of the people that are thinking decide where they're going to go, the herd will follow. I will tell you right now, in your lifetime, the majority of Americans will be vegetarian. It is not if they're going to be vegetarian, it is whether we're going to change in time. The meat and dairy industry, they hired a survey team. And the survey team went out and put the microphone in front of the faces of Americans, and they said to them one question: do you think there will be more vegetarians? 87% of them said yes. And they said, oh my God, why? And they said, I think it's a healthier way to eat. And then they asked him the question, they said, are you a vegetarian? And he said, oh no. But do you realize if we took the American people and we stuck a microphone in their face and asked them what they thought the Pope was Catholic, we would never get 87% of the people to even agree to that. These numbers are astronomical. And the reason is because most people realize that we cannot continue to do what we're doing in the United States of America. You know, I stand in front of you tonight. I came from Great Falls, Montana. Great Falls, Montana is not the hotbed of vegetarianism. I only knew one vegetarian growing up, and I guarantee you she was a very strange lady. I was a football player. I couldn't wait to stuff an animal product down my throat. I needed the protein, I needed the iron. I wanted to go out on the field and knock the other guy down. And so I never saw an animal product I would need. And when I quit playing football, I kept eating the same way, and I got well over 300 pounds. My blood pressure was sky high, my cholesterol was over 300. I'd sit down and have lunch and my nose would bleed. Well, I tell you, coming from Montana, I'd rather be caught riding a stolen horse than admitting to somebody that I was a vegetarian. But I knew I wasn't going to live very long if I didn't change my diet. And so I became the world's worst vegetarian. Lettuce and dairy products. I lost some weight. My blood pressure went down slightly. My cholesterol went down slightly. And I thought, my God, if I can do that being the world's worst vegetarian, just think what I could do if I was vegan. And I could spell vegan. I lost 130 pounds. My blood pressure went from sky high to normal. My cholesterol from 300 to 135. I'm telling you, I was ecstatic. I couldn't hardly wait to share that information with my friends, my family. I was even considering telling my mother-in-law. I've been married for 32 years. Never one time in 32 years have I ever regretted marrying my wife. Now, she can't say that because I married better than she did. But I will tell you that she came with a mother in 32 years that has been a severe test. And I'm thinking of something that had the potential to extend her life. I thought about that for a long, long time. But I finally thought it was the correct thing to do, and I picked up the phone. I called my mother-in-law and I said, "Hey, Marge, let me tell you about my new diet." And on the other end of the phone, I heard it go click. I can remember looking up and saying, "Thank you, God." But I thought it was too direct of an approach. So I called her back and I said to her, "Hey, Marge, why don't you and Ralph come to our house for Thanksgiving dinner?" And just about as snotty as you could be, she said, "But you won't have turkey." And I said, "I'll tell you what, if you come to our house on Thanksgiving, I guarantee you we'll have turkey." She agreed to come. She knew she had me eating crow. Thanksgiving Day showed up. My mother-in-law came in the house like a rocket. Immediately into the oven. She jerked open the oven. No turkey. She looked in the refrigerator. No turkey. She even looked in the dryer. No turkey. And she said to me, she said, "You guaranteed we'd have turkey." I took her by the hand. I was wearing my gloves. I took her to the back door. I opened it up. I had a live turkey in the backyard. I gave my mother-in-law an axe. Not a good idea to give your mother-in-law an axe. And I said to her, I said, "If you want turkey, you got to kill it." Now this story has got good news, bad news. The good news is that turkey is still alive. The bad news, so's my mother-in-law. But you know, I learned something. You can't go and say to somebody, "Let me tell you what you ought to eat." And one finger pointed at you and three back at me. This is not about telling other people what they ought to do. You go to somebody and you say, "Be a vegetarian." You can see their eyes roll up. You can actually hear their ears slam shut. They don't want to hear you. It isn't until somebody comes along and taps you on the shoulder and says, "Are you one of those V people?" You got a 35-second window of opportunity of telling them why. And so tonight, I want to arm you with the facts of why you should consider changing your diet. I don't want you to walk out of here tonight a flaming vegan. I want you to walk out of here tonight committed to do better tomorrow than what you did today. And you know, as we sit here tonight, 1 out of every 2 Americans today will die of one thing: heart disease. The main contributing factors of heart disease: saturated fat and cholesterol. All cholesterol comes from animal products. No such thing as carrot cholesterol, cabbage cholesterol. You can't even mail order kale cholesterol. The majority of saturated fat in the American diet comes from animal products. As we sit here tonight, 1 out of every 3 Americans will have cancer. 1 out of 4 will die of cancer. 1 out of every 7 women in America today will have breast cancer. Used to be 1 out of 20, and then 1 out of 12. Today it's 1 out of 7. They just finished a study. Young women killed in car wrecks, 20 to 40. They did autopsies and they found that 39% of them had cancerous cells of the breast. Are we going from 14% to 40%? And the numbers for men and prostate cancer are exactly the same. Isn't it about time that we stop and take a look at where this is coming from? Do you realize in Hong Kong, they never saw a person with a heart attack until the Western diet showed up? And the pathologist in Hong Kong, when a Westerner would show up and die of a heart attack, they would call all the doctors to come and take a look, because they had never seen anybody die of a heart failure. Do you realize in America today, they say the average cholesterol reading is between 200 and 212? And half of the people that have the average cholesterol reading in America have heart attacks? And 1 out of every 2 that has a heart attack will die from it? And half of all of the heart attacks in America happen on one day. That day, Monday. People going back to work that are absolutely fed up with what they're doing, with the stress. 1 out of every 2 cases of heart attacks in the United States today happen on Monday. Half of the people do not survive the first one. Can you do something about it? Sure you can. Do you realize in Korea, during the war in the 50s, they took American soldiers, 18, 19, 20 years old, that were killed, and they took a look at their circulatory system and they found atherosclerosis, the thing that is the greatest contributing factors of saturated fat and cholesterol, the things that are causing heart attacks. And in Vietnam, in the 70s, they took the same young American boys, 18, 19, 20, did the same thing, and they found that 2 of their main arteries were already occluded because of the saturated fat and cholesterol in the American diet. As we sit here tonight, the average teenage consumption of sugar, of refined sugar in America today is 30 teaspoons of sugar per day by American teenagers. 1 out of every 3 grade school boys in Washington, D.C. today is on a mind-altering drug like Prozac or Ritalin. The average American today is consuming 30 pounds of cheese per person per year. The majority of the calories are coming from fat. We are addicted to fat. We are addicted to caffeine. We're addicted to nicotine. And the list goes on and on. When are we going to wake up to the fact that if you want to live longer, you want to live healthier, you got to change your diet? Loma Linda University, they took people that were eating the standard American diet against those that were just vegetarians, ones that were not eating flesh. Same lifestyle, same area. And they found that the people that were eating no meat lived 7.9 years longer. They reported that information to the scientific community, and they thought the scientific community would say, wow, we have never seen anything with that much of an addition to the longevity. And the scientific community looked at it and laughed. And they said, that's Loma Linda University, Seventh-day Adventists, they just want you to join the church. But the scientific community, if something is a fact, the way you find out is you replicate it. And in England and Germany, they replicated that study, and they came back and said, the only thing wrong with the Loma Linda study is they underestimated the amount of longevity. And in Finland, they took the same study, and they put people on a vegan diet, eating no animal products, and came back and said the people that ate no animal products lived up to 15 years longer than the people in the standard American diet. This is not about only living longer, it's about living better. Do you realize today, the day you were born, your body was designed to last 120 years. You had a little shovel. A little shovel was to throw carcinogens and toxins out of your body. And it works perfectly, and it's called the human immune system. But you know what we're doing is we're adding carcinogens and toxins to our diet by the truckload. We are cumulative. We are a cumulative animal. We keep putting more and more of it in, storing it, and along comes cancer. The United States Department of Agriculture says 75% of all the carcinogens and toxins that cause cancer in the human body come from animal products. 16% come from vegetable products. That means by doing 2 things, giving up animal products, becoming a vegan, and eating organic vegetables, you can take 91% of the things out of your body that cause cancer. And you know, the best case of cancer in the world is the one that shows up 20 years after you've died of old age. How many of you realize today in America, women live to be 79 years old? Men do not live as long as women in the United States. And you know why? Because men have to live with women. I just checked to see if you guys are awake. I apologize. Nah, I really don't. But you know, the amazing thing is, I was raised in Montana during the Second World War. Back then, my mother and father were both milking cows. We had the largest dairy in the state of Montana. They couldn't hire any help. That meant my brother, 2 sisters, and I were raised by my grandparents. Now, back then, daycare was considerably different than today. No swings, no slides, no Lego blocks. Back then, daycare was working in the garden. My first job, 4 or 5 years old, a pint jar, collecting ladybugs and putting them in the jar. Not to kill them, but to count them. The more ladybugs in the garden, the healthier it was. That was my first job. I thought I had died and gone to heaven. I thought it was the Garden of Eden. All I ever wanted to be was a farmer. What a piece of cake. My parents owned a farm. I wanted to be a farmer. 12 years I could go to school. I didn't do anything but party and play football. I was very good at that. I never missed a party. 12 years of going to school, never one time did I ever take a book home. I didn't give a damn. I was going to be a farmer. My senior year, they came to me and they said, "Hey, Lyman, you're going to graduate." I almost had the big one right there. I couldn't hardly imagine it. You know, and you think I had trouble. Can you imagine my instructors? Lyman's going to graduate? But I figured it out. They looked at him and they said, "No brighter than this guy is. We don't graduate him. There's a chance he may come back." They didn't want to take a chance on that. They graduated me. I was thrilled to death. I was going to go home. I was going to be a farmer. I went to that farm. I found that farm was a business to be run. I didn't have the tools to run a business. I'd never the post. Didn't let that bother me any. I went to that good school in Montana. I went to Bozeman. Oh, well, I just thought I'd throw that in. I went to Montana State University because I wanted to be an agribusinessman. I couldn't spell agribusiness, but I knew that's what I wanted to be. I learned about herbicides, pesticides, hormones, and medication. I learned a thing that was called better living through chemistry. I ended up graduating with a degree in agriculture. I went home and saw my father and I said, "Hey, Pop, move over. I'm going to take this one-horse farm and I'm going to turn it into an agribusiness." And my father said to me, "What in the world is that?" And I said, "Man, didn't you ever learn anything? Better living through chemistry." My father said, "Wait a minute. Our job is to work with nature." I said, "Oh, that's old-fashioned. You know, my great-grandfather was an organic farmer. My grandfather was an organic farmer. My father was an organic farmer. I was a chemical junkie." I said, "Move over, watch my smoke. I'm going to turn this one-horse operation into an agribusiness." And over a period of years, I turned it into an operation where I had 7,000 head of cattle, 12,000 acres of crop, and 30 employees. I'll tell you what, first time I wrote a check for $1 million and it didn't bounce, I thought, my God, I have arrived. I'm the Donald Trump of agriculture. 1979, just when I thought I was on top of the world, I got a wake-up call. I ended up paralyzed from the waist down. And my doctor said to me, he said, "You have a tumor on your spinal cord. If that tumor is on the inside of the cord, you have less than 1 chance in a million." Somebody gives you the odds of 1 in a million, what they're saying to you is pick out the wheelchair you like, sucker, you're going to be in it the rest of your life. And here I am in a hospital flat on my back, and there's a lot of things that are going through my mind. It was not about owning 7 combines at $100,000 a piece, or 20 tractors or 30 trucks. What kept going through my mind is why I became a farmer. Birds and trees and living soil. I was buying hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of chemicals. I was killing the birds, killing the trees. I was turning the soil into something that looked like asbestos. And flat on my back, I was thinking about it. Odds of 1 in a million, I'll probably be in a wheelchair the rest of my life. What kind of invalid am I going to be? Am I going to be in a wheelchair feeling sorry for myself? Or could I actually take my life and make it amount to something? And if I did, what in the world would I do? Well, I decided that night, no matter what, whether I walked again or not, I'd spend the rest of my life trying to get that farm back to what it was when I was a kid, with birds and trees and living soil. Next morning, they took me up and operated on me for 12 hours. I stand in front of you tonight. I have no bone on the back of my spinal column. And after they cut the bone off, sure enough, the tumor was on the inside of the cord. They split the covering on the cord. Not only was the tumor on the inside, but it was under the cord. And they could not lift the cord up to get to the tumor. All they could do was pick a nerve and cut it and hope the tumor was attached like a fish on a line. They picked one, they cut it, they took out a tumor the size of my thumb. I walked out of the hospital in 1979 with a 1 in a million operation. But I don't think I walked out because of the skill of my surgeons. I don't think I walked out because of care in the hospital. I think I walked out because somebody up there said, I have more for you to do. When I walked out of the hospital in 1979, I knew that what I had learned at Montana State University was nothing more than brainwashing. I knew that I had to go and re-educate myself. And the first book I got was Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring. First time in my life, I knew what happened to the birds and the trees and the soil. And then it was Francis Moore LePay and Wendell Berry and Thomas Berry. 2 years of being paralyzed and recovering. I don't need to tell you the financial shape of my farm with 7,000 head of cattle and 30 employees. And I went and saw my banker, and I said to my banker, I said, I need your help. I think we need to start farming with nature. My banker, he reared back in his chair, and he said, what in the world does that mean? I said, I think we need to become organic farmers. And my banker, he looked at me and he laughed. He said, you want me to lend you money, and you're not going to spend it with my other customers, the chemical dealer, the pharmaceutical dealer, the fertilizer dealer? He said, there will never be a day like that. And so in 1983, I sold my farm, I paid my debts, but I did not give up on what I set out to do. From 1983 till today, I have educated myself. I've gone around and talked to people about the future. And I'll tell you right now, where we are today in America, it's an absolute disaster. 55% of all Americans today are overweight. The majority of them are obese. 1 out of every 10 Americans before they die will end up being diagnosed as having Alzheimer's. We today have diabetes that is absolutely epidemic. Let me tell you a true story. My father-in-law, a guy that every time we had a family dinner and we had steak and people would cut the fat off of their steak, he was the guy that went around and collected it all and he ate it. And everybody would say, oh, look at Ralph, he can eat anything. Boy, there's nothing about this fat thing that's out there. Every morning, a heart attack breakfast, bacon, the fattest bacon he could find, eggs. Good old Ralph, my wife and I are in Holland. We get a call. Ralph has open heart surgery, a quadruple bypass. I get a hold of Dean Ornish's book on reversing heart disease. I mark the chapters. I take the paragraphs and highlight them so he doesn't have to read the whole book. And I send it to him. And Ralph takes it and puts it on the shelf, sits down and has a heart attack breakfast. And lo and behold, he ends up with a series of strokes. My father-in-law today is in a nursing home. About as close to a vegetable as you can be because he cannot communicate. He has had both legs cut off because of diabetes. And today he's spending more money to stay in a nursing home than if he was in a 5-star hotel because he was too damn proud to read a book about reversing heart disease, where Dean Ornish took people that were too sick for open heart surgery. Just stop and think about it. People that were too sick to put them on a gurney, roll them into the operating room, remove $150,000 from their back pocket. Those dudes were sick. He took those people and he taught them three things: a vegan diet, exercise, walking from that wall to that wall if it took all day. And then he taught them how to meditate. And 83% of them reversed heart disease with diet, exercise, and the mind. And the oldest one was 90 years old, and today he's playing tennis with his 85-year-old brother. This is what we can do. My God, if I can do it, there's not a person in this room that has been responsible for more animals dying than I have. There isn't a person in this room that has consumed more flesh, probably, than I have. I had 10 of my friends that used to come to my house and play cards. Of those 10, I'm the only vegetarian. I'm the only one of the 10 that hasn't had cancer, heart disease, or died. I'm the only one that has lived to be 60 years old without those problems, and 6 out of my 10 friends have already died. This is happening around us all the time. I went to my 42nd high school class reunion. I walked in, I weighed exactly the same as I weighed when I graduated from high school. My friends were there, average of 40 to 60 to 70 pounds overweight. You never saw so many canes, crutches, and walkers in all your life. And I walked in the door the same weight I graduated in high school, and you know what they said? "Oh my God, Howard, have you been sick?" Do you realize that Yankee Stadium, they replaced the seats because Americans are becoming wider? And in the process, they lost 4,000 seats. If you don't think this is true, just go to an airport and sit down and watch the people walking down the hall. I mean, we are the most obese nation on the face of the earth. And is anybody talking to the American people about changing their diet? You turn on the television set, and what do they talk to you about? Every product that's on television is something that is not good for you. They're spending millions of dollars. Nobody wants to talk to you about a tomato or a carrot. They want to talk to you about how good meat is, how good dairy products are, that we really are omnivores, that we should be consuming these products. Do you realize that every person sitting in this room tonight, that your teeth are exactly the same chemical composition as a cow? Is there anybody in here that does not believe that a cow is a real herbivore? That our digestive juices are to break down plants and not meat? Every true carnivore, the chemical composition of their teeth is different. Every true carnivore not only has teeth for ripping and tearing, but they have claws. Is there anybody in here that can leap on the back of a cow, stick in your claws, and take a bite out of the rope? Is there one of you that when you walk in the park and you see a poodle, your mouth waters? Do you see a rabbit and you want to tear it apart and eat it raw? Does your mouth water when you see a ripe, red, juicy apple? Every true carnivore has a very short, smooth digestive system. Get it in, get it out. Meat putrefies at the temperature that's inside of our digestive system. Every true carnivore, get it in, get it out. How about ours? 5 to 7 times longer. It goes back and forth and back and forth. Has all of those little pockets in it. You remember a guy by the name of John Wayne? The Duke. Oh, I'm telling you what. The Duke was a big meat eater. The Duke died of rectal and colon cancer. They took out his colon. It weighed 60 pounds. A normal colon, 11 pounds. The Duke's 60. They opened it up. All of those little pockets in there, plumb full of rotting, putrefying flesh. The Duke did not ride into the sunset one happy camper. This is what we're doing to ourselves. Are we addicted to fat? I go to schools, I talk to the schools, and I say to the kids, if I had a hot dog and it was 10 inches long, how much of that 10-inch hot dog is good, old, greasy, yellow fat? And somebody says, 20%. Somebody's really risky and says, half. 80% of a 10-inch hot dog is good, old, greasy, yellow fat. The other 20%, lips, snouts, eyelids, and anything else that can scrape up off of the floor. And then somebody will raise their hand and say, wait a minute, the last hot dog I had, it was red, must have been kosher. And I say, no, we use red food dye. It gives rats cancer, but don't worry about it, probably do the same thing. And then I say to them, how many of you here eat hamburgers? And boy, everybody wants to get off the hot dog wagon, and boy, the hands go up, hey! How much of a hamburger is good, old, greasy, yellow fat? 10%? 40 to 60% of a good old American hamburger is good old greasy yellow fat. Congress passed a law and said hamburger had to be beef and beef fat. And you cannot get it to stick together if you don't add the fat. And when you end up cooking a hot dog or a hamburger and you see all of that fat that's dripping out, and if you do it on a charcoal grill, do you realize that when the fat drips down on the charcoal, it comes back up on the meat in the form of char? And the char has more carcinogens in it than if you were to smoke several cartons of cigarettes from cooking on charcoal with good old greasy yellow fat. And we wonder why the American people are sick. Now, I travel around and I try to talk to people about the future. I try to talk to them about thinking. On my farm in Montana, when I had 7,000 head of cattle, I had a disease in my cattle. It was called thrombosis and meningitis, TEM. It was a virus that attacked the brain. And for a few seconds, the temperature of the brain would go up, and the animal was absolutely brain dead. Perfectly healthy, but it didn't know enough to eat or drink, and it would stand there and starve to death. I lost 10% of my herd. Financially, it was devastating. In 1990, I heard about a disease in England called mad cow disease. I went to the Library of Congress and I looked it up. And it said in there a slow-growing virus or bacteria, but in England, the first case of mad cow disease was identified in 1986. By 1990, it was an epidemic. It got to the point where they were losing 1,000 cows a week. And the thing we found is that mad cow disease would routinely survive 340 degrees centigrade. A temperature that if we did it in this building, it would be just powdery ash. And they found that the infectious agent had no RNA, no DNA, something that we had never seen before. And so they decided that it was probably an abnormal protein. A normal protein is in a spiral. An abnormal protein is laid out like a slipper. This abnormal protein in association with a normal protein, the abnormal protein will make the normal protein abnormal. 1 gets you 2, 2 gets you 4. And from the time that humans are infected until the symptoms show up is anywhere from 10 to 40 years. Just imagine. First case in England, 1986. By 1990, an epidemic. I happened to be in England in 1996. The Minister of Health stood in front of Parliament and said, we no longer can assure the English people that mad cow disease cannot be transferred from cows to humans. The National Cattlemen's Beef Association said it was the exploding powder keg heard around the world. I was in England. I did 70 press conferences in 9 days. I will never forget. The hotel I stayed in, they turned the breakfast room into a press gallery. Italian television came and set up their lights, their cameras, and I did an interview with them. They took down their camera. CBS put theirs up. I did an interview with Dan Rather, then ABC, NBC, French television, and I went outside, and BBC Radio sent a limo to pick me up to take me down to do World Service Tonight. Well, the driver jumped out of the car. He's wearing a blue suit, a limo driver's hat, and he opens the door for me. I told him, I said, I'm a farm boy. If you ever do that again, I'll break your arm. He took me down BBC to do World Service Tonight. I walk in, I'm talking to the producer, and I said to him, I said, how many stations is this on? He said, oh, I don't know. He said, it's in 200 countries. 200 countries? He said, yeah, few thousand stations. I walked in there, a poor farm boy. I walked out, I was a celebrity. My limo was waiting for me. We were going to do BBC television. Needless to say, my driver did not open the door for me. I got in, BBC television, directly across the street from BBC Radio. We did a U-turn. I said to the driver, I said, hell, I could have walked over here. I went, did World Service Tonight on television, 200 countries, went back to my hotel, 7 newspapers waiting to do an interview. It was like that day after day. I came back to the United States, flew into New York, got off of the airplane, and over the loudspeaker I heard Howard Lyman pick up a white paging telephone. Well, being a celebrity, I looked to my entourage. Needless to say, I was alone. I picked up the phone. It was Oprah Winfrey. Oprah said, how would you like to come to Chicago? We're going to do a show that's called Dangerous Foods. Could it happen here? Well, I'll tell you what. Being a celebrity, I did not jump at that opportunity to talk to 20 million American people. I waited 4 or 5 seconds before I agreed. I flew to Chicago, met Oprah for the first time. She came up to me and she said, you know, I saw the movie Babe 5 times. I will never again eat pork. And I looked up and said, oh, Lord, it's going to be a good day. I'm sitting in the green room. My wife gives me a call. You guys know if you're going to talk to 20 million people, it's an absolute responsibility of your wife to call you up and tell you what to say. Well, I go out, I'm sitting on the stage, and I'm thinking about what my wife said to me when I was in the green room. She said to me, she said, remember, don't say anything stupid. Well, I'm sitting there wondering whether there was a comma in that statement or not. The English majors in here will help the rest of you understand. Oprah came out. I'm sitting on the stage with a guy from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, a grandmother of a girl 16 years old dying, a CJD in England, and she looked at me and she said, here's a man who believes within 10 years we could have a disease that would make AIDS look like the common cold. And I said, absolutely. Oprah said, that's a strong statement. I said, Oprah, we have 100,000 cows a year. Fine at night, dead in the morning. We round them up, grind them up, turn them into feed, and feed them back to other cows. We take roadkill, deer, elk, possum, raccoons, scrape them up off of the road, grind them up, turn them into feed, feed them back to our animals. We take euthanized pets, dogs and cats, full of the chemicals that we use to kill them. The city of Los Angeles alone, 200 tons of dogs and cats a month turned over to the renderers, even though they will freely admit the rendering process does not break down the chemicals that were used to kill them. And Oprah, she looked at the guy from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, Dr. Gary Weber, and Oprah said, Dr. Weber, are we feeding cows to cows? You would have loved it. He was going, well. A limited amount of that is going on. Near as I can tell, 95% of all cattle fed in factory feedlots are eating the remains of other animals. And Oprah, she said, that just stops me cold. I will never again eat a burger. Now, she didn't say to the 20 million people, you shouldn't eat a burger. She didn't say, I think the meat is infected. She just said, that stops me cold. I will never again eat a burger. Now, I knew when I went there that 13 states had a law that was called food disparagement law. That it was against the law to say something you knew to be false about a perishable commodity. I did not go to talk to 20 million people to say something I knew to be false. Every word I said on that show I believed to be true. We were taping it. At the end of 2 hours, I walked up to Oprah when it was over and I said, hey Oprah, give me 10 minutes. I'll get you off of chicken. And Oprah said, only one animal a day. Well, I went about my business, and a few weeks later I got a call from a national news magazine that said, do you realize you're being sued along with Oprah Winfrey and Harpo Production by a group of Texas cattlemen? I said, no, let me put you on hold. I raced into my library. I inventoried my vegetarian cookbooks. I knew those cattlemen wanted those vegetarian cookbooks bad. I went back and said, I can't talk to you now. I got to put in a call to Oprah. And I called and left a message for Oprah, and I said, hey Oprah, we lose this suit. I'm throwing in my vegetarian cookbooks. You got to put up the money. I don't know how many of you realize I have a Doctor of Laws degree. A couple of things I know about the law. Number one, never sue anyone who has nothing. That's me. Number two, never sue anyone that talks to 20 million people a day. That's Oprah. On that show, I called for the fact that we should quit feeding cows to cows. Before we went to trial in Amarillo, Texas, USDA and FDA did exactly what I called for. They banned the feeding of cows, sheep, and goats back to cows, sheep, and goats. The guy that came up with the theory of abnormal protein won the Nobel Prize. I thought, sure, we would go to Amarillo, Texas. The judge, a 72-year-old lady, a tough old heifer, would pick up the hammer, slap it down, and say, case dismissed. Little did I realize, Amarillo, Texas, 25% of all the cattle fed in America come from Amarillo, Texas. 120 feedlots averaging 55,000 head of cattle surround Amarillo, Texas. The largest employer is the slaughter facility killing cattle. Bumper stickers all over town said the only mad cow in Texas is named Oprah. I knew we were in trouble. I said to my lawyer, I said, we need to ask for a change of venue. We went to court. The 72-year-old judge, we said to her, Your Honor, we would like a change of venue. The well has been poisoned. She picked up the hammer and slapped it down and said, motion denied. Bring in the jury pool. 140 people, you never saw so many hats, boots, and belt buckles and all their life. I leaned over to my lawyer and I said, we better write the appeal today. We got less than one chance in 100 that we're going to win here. We were in that courtroom for 6 weeks. A jury that was absolutely steeped in the cattle culture. I knew that I was going to be called by the plaintiff's attorneys. And I was talking to my lawyer, and he said to me, he said, do you realize the plaintiff's attorneys tonight now are down in the bar laughing that there are not 12 people in Texas going to be put on a jury to find a vegetarian not liable? I said, I understand that. He said, it's the first question they're going to ask. I said, I can handle that. But I said, what I want to tell you is the thing that I'm the proudest of today is that no animal has to die for me to live. And my lawyer said, my God, don't say that. This is Texas. Well, I'm on the stand. The plaintiff's attorney is looking at the jury and saying, Mr. Lyman, is it not true that you are, can't hardly say it, a vegetarian? And I looked at the jury and I said, I will not apologize for something that has saved my life. And that jury were nodding their head. They knew exactly what I was saying. Well, I was on the stand for several days. I'll never forget, the plaintiff's attorney looked at me and they asked everything you can think of, and he said to me, "Mr. Lyman, has anybody ever called you irresponsible?" And I said, "Yes." And I looked over, my lawyer's eyes were this big around, he was wondering what was coming. And the plaintiff's attorney was grinning and he said, "Who?" And I looked at the jury and said, "My wife." And the jury is sitting there saying, "Yep, been there, done that." Well, several days on the stand, and finally towards the end, the plaintiff's attorney looks at me and said, "Mr. Lyman, are you proud of dragging everybody through this?" And I said to him, I said, "Let me tell you what I am proud of." I looked over, my lawyer's got his head down, he's got his arms over it, he's going, "No, no, no." And I looked at the jury and said, "The thing I'm the proudest of today is that no animal has to die for me to live." And that jury understood that that's what I believed. And after 6 weeks in that courtroom, we won a unanimous verdict that we were not liable. The cattlemen would not give up. They went to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. In front of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals for almost a year, waiting for their verdict. They came back, unanimous decision that the jury verdict was correct. And then they wrote an opinion, and the opinion said, "Every word that I said on that show was true, and the truth is not actionable." The cattlemen would not give up. They asked for a rehearing. I heard today that the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals turned down the rehearing. The last day of the statute of limitations. The last day of the statute of limitations, 160 other cattlemen filed exactly the same cause of action 40 miles up the road in state court. Their lawyer stood on the courthouse steps and said, "This judge is up for re-election every 4 years. We do not believe that he will be intimidated by the celebrity status of the defendants." I am not from Texas. I have the right to move it from state court to federal court, which we have done. But we are sitting there that yesterday was the 4th anniversary of the day that we taped this show. And for 4 years, I've been paying attorneys. I will tell you right now, we have free speech in America, but it is not free. I hope that every one of you in this room tonight go home and you thank God for Oprah Winfrey. It would have been easy for Oprah to write a check, pay them, take it off of her taxes and let the American people pay for it. But she didn't. She cared enough about your free speech. She went to Amarillo, spent all day in the courtroom, moved her show down there because she cared about your future. Oprah Winfrey, I sat in the courtroom for 6 weeks, close enough that I could touch her. And in 6 weeks, you get to know every wart on every person in that courtroom. Oprah Winfrey is one of the finest people I ever met in my life. I do not believe there is a bad bone in her body. I do not believe that Oprah ever did one bad thing to anyone. But you know, I believe that the change in the paradigm in the United States of America will be led by Oprah Winfrey. And I hope that each and every one of you realize that your job is not to save the world. Your job is to save yourself. I hope that you understand that it's up to us and what we do. And when somebody comes to you and they say, "Well, what is the proper diet?" The first thing I would say to them is take out milk. Do you realize I was raised in the largest dairy farm in the state of Montana, and I believe right now that milk is the worst product that we can put in our body. Cow's milk. The second thing that I would take out of your diet would be chicken. And people look and say, "Why chicken?" In my opinion, nothing gets more chemicals, more hormones, more antibiotics In factory chickens, they even grind up live chickens and feed them back to other chickens. They collect the manure and scrape it together and feed it back to the chickens. Gives a whole new meaning to finger licking good. First thing, 5 years, along with PCBs and dioxin, the most deadly chemicals that are out there. That mother's breast milk would have been cow's milk, would have been banned for sale. They were giving it to the thing they loved the most, their child. Or how about Theo Colbert? She wrote a book called Our Stolen Future. Pregnant women eating fish out of the Great Lakes while pregnant, eating fish 2 meals a month. And they tested them against women that were living in the same area that were not eating fish. And they found that every woman while pregnant eating fish out of the Great Lakes 2 meals a month had a higher amount of learning disability and dyslexia in their child, and was reflected up to 20 years after they were born. I will say to you right now that when they went and tested the water in the Great Lakes, it was getting better. The carcinogens and toxins were going down. And then they tested the fish, and they found that the fish had up to 100,000 times greater concentration of carcinogens and toxins than the water they were swimming in, all the way up to 1 million times more concentration. And the higher you go on the food ladder, the more concentrated it is. And guess what happens when you put it into the human body? And so for me, first thing out, dairy. Second thing out, chicken. Third out, fish, and then red meat. But I will tell you tonight, there's not one person in this room that cannot go 60 days without animal products. I would say to you, give me 60 days. Go 60 days with no animal products and ask yourself, how do I feel? And I will tell you that you will go through some withdrawal. You will end up kicking out carcinogens and toxins. But at the end of 60 days, it'll be the best you ever felt. You will have more energy. You will require less sleep. Your mind will be clearer than it's ever been. Isn't it worth it to go 60 days?
Yeah.
My daughter, from the time that she was a little girl, had complexion problems. We took her to the best dermatologist, bought the best medicine, nothing worked. Her back would break out so bad it looked like somebody went in there with a meat tenderizing hammer and beat her on the back. She was a sophomore in the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. I read a book written by a doctor in California who wrote a book that was called No Milk. He was talking about patients of his that had dairy products in their diet. They were talking about rheumatism, arthritis, asthma, earaches. The list goes on. I called my daughter and I said to her, I said, hey, Ma, I read this book. You ought to give up dairy products and see if your complexion clears up. And she said to me, she said, oh, Dad, you've been in California so long, you're getting just as screwy as they are. She said, I just love milk. I drink a half a gallon every other day. And I said to her, I said, hey, Ma, if you'll give up dairy products for 60 days, if your complexion doesn't clear up, I guarantee you never again in your life will I ever recommend anything. And she said, boy, that's worth it. 6 weeks after she took all dairy products out of her diet, first time in her life, her complexion cleared up. She picked up the phone and called me up and said, you know, Dad, that's the only good advice you've ever given me. I hope that you walk out of here tonight thinking. I hope you go to the bookstore or the library. We have a few copies of my books that are outside, Mad Cowboy. We have some copies of a lecture that I've given 2 hours long that was professionally done, that if you have people that will not read the book, buy the video. They're for sale for $20. It could be the best investment that you ever made. I did not come here just to sell books and videos. I came here tonight to get you to think so that there will be a future for our children and grandchildren. Missoula, Montana is progressive. Missoula, Montana has the potential of changing the entire habits of this state. every time you look into the eyes of a child, ask yourself, every time I spend $1, every time I buy a product, I'm voting on the future. What kind of a future do I want? There's a table set up out there where they are selling organically grown food that is locally grown, a CSA. I hope that each and every one of you go and pick up a brochure from them. There's nothing in the world that you can do better for you and your family than to buy something that is locally grown and organic. Something that you can build on this community. We now have passed the national organic standards that all 50 states now have the same standards. And it happened because of people just like you. 275,000 people cared enough to write in when USDA thought there would be less than 3,000. And you know, they had standards in there that said it was all right to use sewer sludge and call it fertilizer for organic. That you could use genetically engineered seed and call it good for organic. That you could irradiate food and it would be okay to call it organic. And then the worst of all said no farmer could put a label on his product that was grown in standards greater than the national organic standards. 275,000 people wrote in. More people than responded to government during the Vietnam War. And the Secretary of Agriculture came out and said, we are withdrawing the Big Four for now. For now. You know how to tell whether a politician and a bureaucrat are lying? Their lips are moving. Remember, if we are going to have a future, it's going to come from you here. Remember that the cornerstone of our democracy is our family farmers and ranchers. If they are going to survive, where we have gone from 2.5 million to less than 400,000, that half of them will be out of business within 5 years. If the family farmers and ranchers are going to survive, it's going to depend on the consumers. And so, help them make the transition. That we feed people and not animals. That we treat animals as nature intended. That we don't put them into pens. We don't shoot them up with hormones and antibiotics and insecticides, and the list goes on and on. No one has come further from this issue than I have. And if I can make the change, you can make the change. And together, we can make sure there's a future for our children and grandchildren. I have had my time to tell you what I think of. What I'd like to do now is give you the opportunity to ask questions. If you will shout them out, I'm about half tractor deaf. I will repeat them so that everybody hears them. Let's answer some questions. Yes?
What's the meat irradiation? What are they doing to that now?
Irradiation? The question is, what have they done with irradiation of meat? They take spent nuclear waste, pass food through it so that they can kill the bacteria, not only the bad bacteria, but the good bacteria. And they have approved this now. And the interesting thing about it is they have to put a label on it that says that it's been irradiated. And the American people will not buy this product because it has the nuclear radiation label on it. And you know what they want to do now? They want to take it off so that you won't even know that it's been irradiated. That's what happens when we have the best government that money can buy.
I've been collecting the boxes that the produce comes in, and over the last year I noticed there were warnings on there that said treated with orthophonol and waxes and paraffins, but those warning labels are disappearing from those boxes. So what's happening, you know?
Well, the interesting thing is that most people, when the food comes in and it comes in boxes and it tells you the country of origin, people do not want to buy things that come from places that are outside of the U.S., places that have standards that are not as strict as ours. Do you realize that the banned chemicals in the United States, that we are the largest producer of banned chemicals in the world? We send them out to countries that use them on the products that they send them back to us. That Less than 2% of the food that is imported in the United States is inspected, and 40% of it fails the inspection, and most of it is consumed before we eat it. That they don't want people to know the country of origin. They don't want you to know what was used on it. And that's why I recommend you buy organic, because you know that they could not use genetically engineered seed, that they could not use the chemicals on it, that they do not put paraffin and all of the other things that are on it. And look for something that says certified organic, because if it just says organic, if it came from Mexico, it could be called organic, and I wouldn't buy it if it was blessed by the Pope coming across the border. Look for something that says certified organic.
There's currently a survey being run about organic foods, and they're talking about using genetically engineered seeds for organic foods and making that be considered organic. What do you think about that?
Question is, they were trying to get genetically engineered seed used as organic, and it failed. Today, in the national organic standards, you cannot use genetically engineered seed for organic. You cannot use sewer sludge on it and call it organic. You cannot irradiate it and call it organic. And if you raise it in standards greater than that, you can put a label on it. The American people spoke because over 98% of them said that was a bunch of crap, and the politicians were scared to death. They took it out. But don't trust them, because they'll, in my opinion, they'll try to do it again. But today, the standards are you cannot put them in.
Archer Daniels Midland has a long way to go.
Archer Daniel Midland is a company that goes out and advertises on Sunday on Meet the Press or whatever, and you'd swear up and down that they were the greatest friend of the environment you ever saw. I'll tell you, Archer Daniel Midland is the company that puts more political money in the coffers of both parties than anybody else. They actually paid a penalty of over $100 million for price fixing. I'll tell you what, if my daughter would have come home and was going to marry into the Archer Daniel Midland family, I'd have probably sent her to Australia.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to know how you feel about hunting.
What?
I'd like to know how you feel about hunting.
Okay. Question is, how do I feel about hunting? Well, an interesting thing, the state of Colorado asked every hunter that was successful to cut the head off of their deer and turn it in because they wanted to check it under a microscope for chronic wasting disease. 5% of all the deer in the state of Colorado turned in tested positive for chronic wasting disease, the animal disease that is equal to mad cow disease, a spongiform disease. The state of Colorado, even though they knew who the hunter was, and his name and address, did not inform them of the ones that were testing positive, and they took it home and shared it with their family, their friends. State of Montana ended up with a group of elk here that were killed, incinerated, cost the state $50,000 to incinerate them, and then they found that the ash is still infectious. Remember, in England, at 1100 degrees centigrade, they store the ash today in blimp hangars. Would I eat an animal, a wild animal out there today, knowing what I know about chronic wasting disease? No. Is it lower in fat than what you get out of factory feedlots? Yes. Does the animal have a better life than those that are incarcerated in factory feedlots? Yes. Would I eat them? No. And why? Because our standard American diet today has too much fat, too much protein, too much cholesterol, zero fiber. If we had the most pristine wild animal in the world, what do we have? Too much protein, too much fat, too much cholesterol, zero fiber. Would I eat them? No.
I don't think anybody argued as far as vegetables, fruits, fiber is concerned. Being good food, what about the loss of minerals and nutrients in soil?
Good question.
Taking place over the last 50 years.
Good question. The question is, how about the fruits and vegetables that are grown in a depleted soil that have been grown for the over 50 years? The reason that I recommend organic is because the fertilizer for organic is nature's fertilizer, which is called compost. And if you look at all of the tests that I've ever seen on the nutritional value, the minerals, and the vitamins that are in that is grown organically compared to that is grown commercially, they are astronomically different. And so I would say to you today, given the choice of buying commercially grown fruits and vegetables, I would buy organic no matter what they cost if they were going to give me the commercially grown, because I think they are very low in the minerals and the nutrients that are out there, and every study that I have ever I've seen upholds that. Buy that is organically grown because they build the soil. They build the soil as nature intended, and they are much more in line with what the human body needs.
I think a lot of farmers are doing commercial farming right now because there's a huge crisis with the amount of debt most farmers have to pay. I think the average Montana farmer is like $400,000 in debt, and they're paying like $45,000 a year just to try to pay off the interest on all of their loans that they've incurred. I mean, I definitely think that they should switch to organic, but they're just trying to do whatever they can do to make money
Sure.
to get rid of these.
Well, let's look at the issue. And the question is basically that farmers are drowning in debt. If we take Montana, where we're raising cattle much more in line with what nature intended, that they are grazing, that are out there doing what nature intended, and the guy that is raising the calf today in Montana has never had a lower income stream today than he has ever had in recorded history. At the same time, Cargill, Conagra, and IBP, the three major slaughterers that control 70 to 90% of the market, have never had greater profits than they have had. The thing that comes down is that the majority of profit today in all of agriculture, including corn, wheat, soybeans, cotton, rice, dairy, beef, the majority of the profit today in all of the agricultural industries is coming from vegetable, and the highest percentage of it is coming from organic vegetables. Is there a future, in my opinion, in the production of animals in the state of Montana or anywhere else in this country? No. Is there a future in dairy? No. So I would say to them right now, do whatever you have to do, but transition your farm to dealing, to feeding people and not animals, and do it where you control your product until you get to the end consumer. And that's why I like farmers markets. That's where farmers are making the most money, and that's why you as consumers should take your money and support the commercial farmer and rancher that is trying to make the transition to becoming a feeder of people and not animals. And I will tell you right now, I know exactly what you're talking about. I've been there, and it is a noose around the neck of agriculture, and the big agribusiness is laughing all the way to the bank because the little guy is standing up and supporting them and going out of business. They can't feed their families. They can't even send their kids to school, and the corporate profits are the greatest they've ever been. They gotta change. There is no future in what they're doing, in my opinion.
I was under the perhaps mistaken impression that being a vegan was just more than diet. Could you speak to that, please?
Good question. The question is, being a vegan is more than just diet. Absolutely. A vegan basically uses no animal products. Animal products, leather, or animal products. If you look at cosmetics, cosmetics come from the tallow and the rendering process. And so there are a lot of women in America today that are taking lipstick and putting it on that comes from the rendered fat of dead animals. What we need to look at is when we're talking about being a vegan, it is not supporting the animal industry, period. Whether we're talking about meat, whether we're talking about eggs, whether we're talking about yogurt, whether we're talking about leather, whether we're talking about cosmetics. I speak at a lot of schools, and a lot of kids come to me in the schools and they say, "Oh, I'll bet you're wearing leather." And I take my shoes off and I kick them out in the audience, so that they can see that they are not made out of leather. I will go and buy my shoes. I will go and spend up to $20, $25 for almost any pair of shoes. And every one of them is man-made. I do not buy leather belts. I do not use animal products. So you notice my wallet is not made out of leather. It's made out of hemp. I'm not sure, but maybe if you got out in the forest and nothing else, you could always smoke it. I'm not sure. Question?
You were talking about how you turn your soils through chemicals into a consistency of asbestos. How would you rehabilitate that, especially on a massive farm?
Sure, good question. If we take my farm where we put the chemicals on, where we saw the soil texture change, how do you rehabilitate it? You go and you start growing crops on it like legumes that take nitrogen out of the air, that you put it in, that you end up encouraging the most important thing in the world, which is earthworms. Do you realize I had a good friend that was in San Francisco, his family was in Iowa, and they were chemical farmers. He went home, and here's a guy who's a vegan, his family's laughing at him, and he said, I'll tell you what, let's grab a shovel and a pickup, and let's go out on the farm and I'll show you something. All day on that farm they dug holes. You know what they never found? Never found an earthworm. You've got to go and do what nature intended, and that is to use compost. The material, the leaves, the straw that is breaking down, that's what rebuilds the soil. And if you're going to build the soil back, can you do it? Yes. But it takes 4 or 5 years to do it. Is it worthwhile doing it? Absolutely. Just like that gentleman says there, the food that is grown on the dead soil, I can go to the Sahara Desert right now, take chemicals and water, I can grow vegetables. Are they any good for you? I don't think so. So can you rehabilitate the soil? Sure. But you got to commit yourself to do it. You have to go and do what nature intended. And when you get the angleworms back, I'll tell you what, earthworms in the soil will tell you that you have something that is capable of growing food for you.
You're talking about human waste that they take in this town. They take it to a place out of town here. They remake compost out of human waste. All these dump trucks that pump out the septic tanks on here, take it there, and make human waste. Can you talk about that?
Well, yeah. The question is, we're talking about compost that is made out of human waste. The problem is in the American sewer system that the heavy metals go into the sewer system, go into the human waste that then is mixed with compost, and they try to get you to think that that's fertilizer. Do you realize New York City took some of this compost human waste full of heavy metals, took it down to Oklahoma, put it on farms, and that land, as long as humans inhabit planet Earth, will be useless, will never be usable to grow food because of the heavy metals that are in it. What do they do different in China? They take human waste that is not contaminated with heavy metals. Can they make compost out of that? Yes. But they do it because they do not contaminate it in the process. If it comes through the sewer in North America, all of the Prestone, all of the oil, all of the heavy metals that wash off of the streets that go into that, I will tell you right now, I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. Compost, in my opinion, should come from clean waste, tree branches, leaves, grass clippings, without putting chemicals on it. That's the compost that nature intended to build the soil.
But when you're talking about sewer, are you talking about an individual home's septic tank?
No.
Or city sewer system?
I'm talking about city. I'm talking about that washes off down the drains. And how many times have you seen where they have a cab stand and you see the oil and the Prestone that has come out of the cabs that have boiled over, that every time it rains goes down in the sewer that goes into the municipal sewer waste? That's what I'm talking about. Not that. There's nothing wrong with human waste as compost if it is not contaminated with heavy metals. And that's what they do in China right here.
So far, we've been talking about pretty much what's good for humans out of this whole thing. I just got a magazine called Business Ethics. They were saying that McDonald's was trying to aim for a 95% rate of kill with the stun guns when they shot them. But when they actually were inspected, they only got about 40% of the cattle dead the first time they hit them. And a lot of them were being skinned alive. Can you talk about slaughterhouses, what actually happens to the animals' welfare?
Well, the first thing we need to do is to look at the fact that 100% of the cattle that are stunned, they do not die from being stunned. They do not stun the animal to kill it. The animal dies because they cut its throat. That's how the animal dies. They want the animal alive when they cut the throat so that the heart will pump the blood out of the animal. They do not stun an animal to kill it. If you go into a chicken operation, it will be the most sickening thing you ever saw in your life. They have a thing like a skill saw, with the chickens hanging down there with the idea that they meekly put their necks out there and let the skill saw cut their throats. Well, most chickens, when they end up seeing what's happening, they rear back. They miss the skill saw that's supposed to cut their throat, and then what do? They dump them into scalding water alive. I'll tell you, I've been in slaughterhouses. I've seen animals that got loose that have been stunned on the kill floor. You never saw such a terrified animal in your life. If I had the ability to take everybody in this room tonight and take you to a slaughterhouse so that you could see how it was done, I would not take one of you, because you will never erase it from your mind the rest of your life. If I could take everyone here and take you to the runway to the kill floor, where you could see the look in the eyes of the animals that are going to the kill floor, you would know they know they're going to die. They know it because they can smell it, they can see the animal in front of them when they are being slaughtered. But I would say to you, never go into a slaughterhouse, because you will never erase it from your soul the rest of your life. If slaughterhouses had glass walls, this country would be awash in vegetarians. We have this idea that if somebody else does it for us and they put it into this cute little plastic package, it is all right. It is one of the worst things that I've ever seen. I did a radio show, and a guy called me up and said, "How about humane slaughter?" It is an oxymoron. There is no such thing as humane slaughter. Some animals die easier than others, but none of them go to the kill floor clicking their heels and saying, "Yippee skippy, I'm going to be a McDonald's hamburger tomorrow." 87% of USDA inspectors working poultry plants will not eat the product they are inspecting. I would touch it with a 10-foot pole. Here in the
I was wondering if you have any food vices that you had trouble giving up or anything like that?
Any foods that I've had trouble giving up?
Well, any food vices now after you know?
Yeah, I would say that the food that I guess I enjoyed the most of anything growing up was tuna fish. I always loved tuna fish sandwiches. And there is a product out there right now that was made by Worthington Food that is called Tuno. And the interesting thing about it is, if you feed it to somebody, the first time I got it, they had to show me the container, because I could not believe that it was really plant-based. And that's probably the only one. I'm going to tell you a true story. I was having a dream. And in this dream, a guy had a gun to my head, and he said, "Eat a hamburger or I'm going to shoot you." And I said, "You're damn right. Give me that hamburger." He gave me that hamburger in my dream. I came my hair like this, and I turned around to him and said, "You better shoot." I woke up in the damnedest cold sweat you ever had in your life. But I find today meat to be absolutely repulsive. And for a guy that's probably eaten more meat than anybody in this room, never again in my life will it ever cross my lips. And I think that dairy products is even worse than meat.
That was my question. Where is your position on like organic?
About organic dairy? Is organic dairy better than the others? Yes. Anytime you have something with no herbicides, pesticides, hormones, or medication, is it better? Yes. Is it good for your body? No. Your body treats bovine secretion as an invader. It actually attacks it. Is it good for you? No. Is there any similarity between the secretion of a bovine and mother's breast milk? No. I would say that there is no place, in my opinion, in the human diet for the mammary secretion of a bovine, period.
What do you recommend feeding pets? Cats, dogs?
Okay, good question. The question is, what do I recommend for pets? A dog can eat a vegan diet exactly the same as I do, and they will get along perfectly. A lot of people say to me, whoa, wait a minute. My dog will not eat this, will not eat that. Let me give you an example. My brother-in-law brought his dog to me, a Basset Hound. He wanted me to take care of it while they were on vacation. And he said to me, he said, Hector will not eat pancakes. I said, no problem, Jack, don't worry, I'll take care of him. Jack drove out of the yard. I turned to Hector and I said, Hector, you are going to learn to love pancakes. First day I gave him pancakes, he turned up his nose. Second day I gave him pancakes, he turned up his nose. Third day, he not only ate that day's pancakes, he ate the other 2 days too, and he wolfed them down like he loved them. Dogs can eat exactly what you eat. Cats have to have taurine. Cats are true carnivores. The emperor of the world allows my wife and I to live with him. Emperor Ben weighs 16.5 pounds. His favorite food, cantaloupe. Loves peas, corn, Brussels sprouts, green beans, but I give Emperor Ben a teaspoon of tuna fish a day, so he gets taurine. He's 7 years old, weighs 16.5 pounds. He is slim and trim, and he is also an alarm cat. I don't know how many of you have ever had an alarm cat. Alarm cat, 5 o'clock in the morning, he comes, sits on my wife's chest. He sits there and purrs, reaches up, bites her on the eyebrow. If that doesn't work, he bites her on the nose. If that doesn't work, he sits there and he stares at her and he purrs and he picks up his paw, sticks out his claws, and he taps her on the cheek and says, Ben's ready to eat. He's an alarm cat.
Any new research and discoveries going on with the growth hormones or feedings that are livestock?
The drug hormones and what are happening to humans?
Yes.
Okay, sure. There happen to be some interesting things down in Puerto Rico, for example. They were taking hormones and putting them into chickens. They ended up with girls 7 years old starting their period, boys that were developing breasts. We have seen the time that young women start their periods in America going from 16 down now to 9 and 10. And the more animal products that go into our diet, the more hormones that we are using, the lower it goes. Interesting thing, women are more likely to have breast cancer the earlier they start their period. In Japan, 1945, girls started their period about 16. They started eating the American diet. Now it is down to 12. I don't think there is any doubt of the relationship between the hormones that are out there that we're using on our food and what's happening in the human body.
What are your thoughts on vivisection?
What are my thoughts on vivisection? Absolutely the worst thing that the humans ever came up with. We have never come with any medical breakthrough that came from the testing on animals. What happens is every breakthrough we've ever had is on humans, and then they go back trying to justify it by testing it on animals. It is an industry that is out there that is wasting our dollars. If we want to know whether it works, test it on humans. If they can develop it, try it on their own families. Using vivisection, in my opinion, is absolutely, totally useless. And even here in this university where they do it, the sooner they would quit it, the better.
Now, you said yourself that in agriculture, you use organic that we last, you say you want to be organic. Can you give some realistic plans for farmers in the economy today that have changed your organic?
Sure. The question is that agriculture today is in the most difficult straits that it's ever been, and what's an example of how they can do something about it? Well, the amazing thing is I had a friend, and this friend was the agricultural reporter for the Washington Post, and he went and bought a 5-acre organic farm, and he started growing organic. And the amazing thing about it, when he was growing organic, he was taking what he was growing and he was selling the majority of it to the place he used to work, which was the Washington Post. And when I talked to him, I said, how are you doing on this little 5-acre farm? And he said, well, I work about 9 months out of the year. He said, I was able to double my income from what I got when I was a reporter on the Washington Post. If we take somebody, for example, in this area that has a cattle operation, for example, what I would say is take 1 acre. There is not a farm, there is not a ranch in Montana that does not have 1 acre that could not be predicated on producing food for humans, and people learn to start marketing it in farmers markets. There are 18,000 more farmers markets in America this year than there were last year. The organic industry is growing 25% per year, and it has for the last 7 years. The greatest percentage of net income in agriculture today is coming from organic production. So do they have to take the whole farm and do a whole lot of different things? No. They need to take an acre and learn how to do it. Because why not do something that brings you profit rather than everything you do that all it gets you is more debt, more debt, more debt. The American farmer and rancher, family farmer and rancher, are the finest individuals alive on the planet today, and they are absolutely being screwed to death. I will walk on jagged glass for the family farmer and rancher in America, and I'll tell you there's no greater foe in the world for factory farmers than I am, and I was a factory farmer, and I'll tell you, we do not need them. We're putting more people in an early grave because of them than anything else there. But remember, family ranchers today are the suppliers of the factory feedlots. They got to quit doing that, and when they do that, we will turn the corner in America.
I was curious, have you done any lectures or talks in areas like Alaska or northern Canada where you encounter a larger native or indigenous population and have to deal with questions about non-hunting, non-subsistence food supplies versus contaminated hunting sources?
Question is, have I talked in Alaska? Yes, I have. Did I talk to the Eskimos? Yes, I did. Are there any people on the face of North America that are more contaminated than the Eskimos? No. Only one species that is the equal to the Eskimos, and that happens to be the polar bears. Both of them, their bodies are absolutely loaded with PVCs and dioxin, and it's coming from the fish that are there. The interesting thing, nobody consumes more protein than the American Eskimos. They live to be 46 years old and they die of kidney failure. They cannot even live long enough for a good old standard American heart attack. Do they have a problem on what to do? The American rancher is a piece of cake compared to the Eskimo. But the thing about it is, most of them do not understand why they're dying, because nobody has ever come and educated them on the fish that they've been eating for eons, that today it is an absolute toxic dump. And what we need to do is to educate those people before we kill them, and that's exactly what we're doing today. Turning the oceans into toxic dump sites, the Eskimos and the polar bears are going to be the first two on the planet that are going to disappear because of it.
Do you think that if more farmers in America turn to organic farming, then corporations are only going to try to create more non-organic markets and farms in other countries where they're exploiting workers?
Good question. The question is, if we have more agricultural producers in America go to organic, will the multinationals, will they go and try to go outside of the country? The interesting thing is multinationals today are actually going now and buying organic products. If you take, for example, Philip Morris, the real big multinational that really cares about American people, you know, they just went and bought Boca Burger. That we ended up with Kellogg's that went and bought the company that was producing vegetarian food, Worthington Food. The multinationals today know where the future is going. Are they changing? Yes. Will they bastardize it? Yes. Should we support them? No. Remember, when you pull out your wallet, when you don't spend your money with those guys, that's the loudest statement that you can make. Are they bad guys? Yes. Are they going to do anything they can to get your money and put you in an early grave? In my opinion, yes.
I heard they rewash eggs and post another date on the cartons, and I also heard that apples with wax on them can stay in a box for over a year, can stay right?
Question is, do they take eggs, wash them, put a date on them? I've seen things on television where they've actually showed that to be true. Apples that have the wax on them, can they store them for a long time? Of course they can. But you realize that if you buy something that is chemically grown, that USDA said that you should wash them with detergent, how many of you take your lettuce, your carrots, and put them in the sink and put your dishwashing soap on them and wash them? That's because they put a binder on them that sticks the spray on them. And if you don't put a detergent on, you can't break that. If you take an apple that has waxed on it, I mean, that's only decent to feed your mother-in-law. I mean, that's even though something else in your body.
Do you know Ted Turner's theory on buying ranches and turning into bison?
Yeah. Ted Turner, the only problem with him is a little short of money. He thinks he needs all of it in the world. He's only a billionaire. He buys these ranches, takes the cattle off, and puts buffalo on. The interesting thing, are the buffalo treated better than the cattle? In most cases, yes. You know why? Because if you've ever tried to herd buffalo, you understand that you know where a buffalo goes? Where a buffalo damn well wants to go. Now, is eating buffalo meat better than what comes out of the factory feedlots? Yes, because it's lower in fat. Should it be in your diet? No. Should you spend your money, in my opinion, on something that Ted Turner produces? No.
What about the protein diet?
What about the protein diet? I didn't think anybody would ever ask the protein diet.
What would you say to somebody?
The amazing thing about it is if you take the Zone diet, which I wrote an entire chapter in my book about, or the Atkins diet, I talked to a medical doctor, Dr. Joel Furman, who deals with people with eating disorders, and he said he's never had a person on a high-protein diet for an extended period of time that hasn't had severe kidney damage, and in many cases, they have already lost the use of one kidney. Does it work? Absolutely. You will lose weight. You know why? Because we do not store protein. High protein comes in, we break it up, replace the cells, excess protein goes to the kidneys. It's an amino acid. If we do not neutralize it with calcium, which we take out of the bones, we'll destroy the kidney. And what does the body need for fuel? Carbohydrates. There's no carbohydrates in high protein diets. What does it do? It goes and burns the fat in our body. Will we lose weight? Yes. Will we lose our kidneys? Yes. If we look at people on high protein diets, when they go off them, invariably, they gain more weight than what they lost. Should you be on a high protein diet? In my opinion, it is the damn criminal to take people today and put them on something that has the potential to destroy their kidneys so that they can lose a little weight on the short term so that these guys can run around with millions of dollars from damn fools buying a book that tells them that what they're doing is exactly what they ought to do when we know better that it's not true. Read the chapter I put in my book, Mad Cowboy, about the Zone diet. It is absolutely, in my opinion, the worst thing that is out there. Last question, and then I'm going to sign books, videos for anybody. I'll stay and talk to anybody you want. This gentleman here.
Just curious, what is it that's in the commercial feed? If I eat a steak out of the grocery store, it immediately elevates my blood pressure, sometimes to the point of even having nosebleeds. But if I eat an organic steak, it doesn't have that same effect.
Well, the first thing that you want to look at is if you're talking about something that today in the meat market, eating a steak, it has 70 times more fat than that your grandparents ate. That's the first thing. It has herbicides, pesticides, hormones, and medication in it. Every animal in a factory feedlot, they put hormones in the ear, they give them vaccinations up to as many as 21. They pour insecticides on their back. What happens is when you take meat that is high in cholesterol and it goes into your circulatory system, the first thing it does is it forces your circulatory system to contract. And what happens when it contracts? Your blood pressure goes up. Why does your nose bleed? So the top of your head does not come off. My God, man, is your body telling you something? Do you need a telegram? I know exactly how you felt because it happened to me. And I will tell you right now, if your nose is bleeding, that means that you are well on your way to open heart surgery. If you don't have 150 grand in your back pocket, if you're not willing to have 100% of the people that have open heart surgery have brain damage, change your diet. I will stay and talk to anybody as long as you would like.